welcome to Civics, a program on Arlington Independent Media. I'm Michael Shea, the host of this episode of Civics, a program I'd like to say we hope you're both informed and inspired by this program. We're joined today by Yasmine Taeb, who has been a volunteer in the Arlington community now for about 3 years, and she's been a volunteer, an activist, and an organizer. She's had a lot of experiences, and she's going to share them with us today. Yasmine, thanks for coming on the program.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to meet you. So let's go back to the beginning. Can you think of a time, or the first time, you felt like you were engaged in your community, wherever it was?
Sure. I think I would say it goes all the way back to high school. I was pretty active in high school in general, and in the community in general as well. Anytime I felt as though we were struck by any sort of, tragedy at home, whether there's a hurricane or anything even internationally, I would organize charity drives. So at a very young age, I think I always had that passion.
And where was this? Where did you grow up?
This is in South Florida.
Okay. All right. Well, let's not start on Florida. And so then, what were you like as a student? What were some of your interests in high school, maybe, and then later in college?
Sure. So I was the sort of student that I would probably describe myself as an activist.
Okay.
I was the one that was always organizing the rallies, the protests, creating student organizations, running them. Pretty active at the university level, also in law school as well.
Okay.
So,
I didn't realize you were a lawyer.
I am.
All right. Did you find that relatively easy in law school to remain kind of active and engaged? Because law school,
sure,
at least the first 2 years, from what I hear, are very demanding.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely was challenging, and I think I probably wasn't as active in the community. I definitely did a bit of volunteering. There was a program called VITA. It was Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, where students in law school would provide free assistance to residents who aren't able to pay to get their taxes done. So, for example, I would do that every year. I also helped in local community groups as well. But it definitely was challenging.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so what are some of the organizations? You moved to Arlington about 3 years ago.
Correct.
What are some of the organizations you've been involved with, and how did that happen?
Sure. So in Arlington, I'm pretty active in the Arlington Young Dems. I'm a co-chair for the Muslim Caucus. I'm also active with, nationally with the DNC with their Ethnic Coordinating Committee. Currently, I'm serving on the Arlington Human Rights Commission, and previously I served on the Commission on the Status of Women. I think it's actually very important for young people to be engaged. And I had a similar conversation actually at the Arlington Young Dems meeting this past week, where they asked a couple of us to come in to speak to the group, to talk about the value of engagement, the importance of the youth to be engaged in Arlington. Because I think that's something that, even though Arlington is generally, the community is very politically active, the youth tend to not be as active in some of these civic organizations and commissions.
Or yeah, they're looking for people sometimes.
Yes.
But some. Now, just so people can be clear, the commissions you've been on are on. It's an appointed position.
Correct.
And there's somewhat of a process. The idea is to first you should get to know the commission a little bit, make sure what interests you, and then you approach make contact with the county board. So what drew you to the commission, and how did you get appointed?
Sure. So when I first moved to Arlington, and this was right after I finished law school, I took the bar. I knew I wanted to live in the area. Came out. I got a place in Arlington. I wanted to be active in the community. I didn't really know how or what to do, so I just went on the county website, right? Actually, it was very easy to navigate. They have a list of commissions and boards on the website. And it's pretty organized. It's divided up into issue areas. So in law school, I focused on women's issues and human rights issues. So those were the commissions I was looking for, and I saw an opening on the Women's Commission. I contacted a member on the commission. I went into the office. I found out what the application process was. It took literally 3 minutes to fill out the application, submitted it. I got contacted by Barbara Favola, who at the time was the liaison on the board to the Women's Commission. She met with me, interviewed me, asked me why I was interested in serving on the commission, and then shortly thereafter I was appointed at the county board meeting.
Right.
And I served on that commission for about 3 years. I found it very, very interesting, very rewarding, and I recently just got appointed to the Human Rights Commission.
Right. And it actually sounds like there was a lot more of a process for those commissions than maybe every commission. I've been appointed to some commissions, and I wasn't interviewed.
Okay.
But I guess that depends a little bit on the commission, what's happening,
so.
and so, yeah. No, that's great to hear, though.
So the reason why I was interested in the Human Rights Commission in particular was it functions a little differently than the other commissions on the county board. We actually receive, investigate, and review complaints from Arlington residents or folks that are working in Arlington County. So I find that actually very interesting to be able to be part of this process, to ensure that there is no unlawful discrimination in Arlington. So that's the part that I enjoy the most. And of course, we do our annual awards luncheon or award ceremony where we honor individuals in the county and also organizations and businesses that have a strong commitment to human rights.
Right.
So.
And not just those commissions, but other things you've done. Do you find that your engagement in it, are you doing things that you you're bringing skills that you've learned elsewhere, or some of this engagement is really learning by doing? Or
Sure.
maybe it's a mix. What's your sense of that?
I would say it's probably a mix. So the work we do on the commissions, I think it's a mix of what you bring to the table, right? So I think half of the commission, maybe half of the membership on the commission, they have a legal background, the others do not.
Right.
So that's definitely not a necessity. But as far as being engaged in the community in other respects, right? If you're working on a political campaign, for example, or you're chairing or co-chairing one of the caucuses for, the Arlington Young Dems or ACDC, I think these are a lot of the skills you gain at the job. So.
Right. And a lot of community organizations, and maybe particularly at the neighborhood level, a lot of it is really just showing up. I've met people on this show who have been presidents of civic associations, or met people through this show, and they got that job because they were willing to show up and handle the meetings. A lot of times that is the main skill you have, is you can handle a meeting. What are we talk about the Young Dems, that's the Young Democrats. What are some of the things you've done with them, and how did you get involved with them?
Sure. So I got involved in the Arlington Young Dems shortly after I worked on the president's re-election campaign.
Okay, right.
So I was a field organizer in Loudoun County in Virginia for OFA in 2012. That was itself a very rewarding experience. I met a number of people very dedicated, devoted to their communities, great Democrats. So it was through OFA that I met some of the other field organizers that were active with AYD.
Okay.
And then I knew that they also had a Muslim caucus, and they were looking for someone to co-chair that caucus. And I've been doing that with another colleague. And in that caucus, for example, what we do is we organize a number of forums, we do a number of meet and greets. Right now I'm helping the Arlington Young Dems with an immigration forum that we're going to hopefully be hosting in the next couple weeks, and also working on a women's panel as well.
What do you look back, I know you're young, what are you proudest of, do you think? What's your biggest sense of satisfaction from doing
Biggest sense of satisfaction? What I'm doing now on a full-time basis, I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah.
I serve as a government relations manager for the Arab American Institute, which is a DC-based advocacy organization representing the political arm, essentially, of the Arab American community. So advocating on issues for the community, anything ranging from civil rights, civil liberties issues, immigration reform, racial profiling, domestic surveillance, and ranging to a number of national security issues, our drones program, Guantanamo, et cetera. So, I find that job to be incredibly rewarding. and not a lot of people actually do those jobs, I think.
Right.
So, and I think it's definitely important. So, and I'm happy at it. So.
Well, and it sounds like you've been able to align your professional work life with your volunteer outside of work life pretty well, in the sense that it's a similar type of activity.
I agree. So, for example, outside of work, and we discussed this a little bit before this show, but I'm active in one of the congressional races right now. This is for the 8th.
Right.
I'm helping Adam Ebbins' campaign. So outside of work, for example, I try to assist them with a number of, policy issues,
Right.
things that I'm working on
Right.
in my professional capacity.
You must feel somewhat lucky in Arlington, because the last few years seem to have been a little bit unusually heavy on special elections and now a congressional race, which really had not happened in a long time. So,
Correct.
did you come to Arlington for that reason, or has it been a pleasant surprise?
It's definitely been a pleasant surprise. So as you're aware, we just had the special election
Right.
for our board. And I was obviously helping out and doing canvassing for that race as well. No, it's definitely been a pleasant surprise. And this is what I love about Arlington is if you want to be involved, there are plenty of ways for residents to be involved. So the school board election, for example, is coming up next month. And then the congressional primary is coming up the following month. So, I mean, I think there are numerous opportunities, especially for the youth, to get involved, which I strongly encourage.
Because we also had a special election a year ago for the county board, so it's been this sort of very busy time in Arlington politics. What are maybe some issues that you have not worked on that you feel like interest you? What are some things that you think down the road you'd be interested in working on? Do you have anything that?
I mean, I've worked on a number of civil and human rights issues, which I'm very passionate about, which is great. I think a couple of other issues that I would like to work on a bit more. I mean, I've worked on immigration reform, human trafficking, maybe doing a little more work on homelessness and poverty. For example, the fellowship that I'm in at the Center for American Progress, one of our, I guess, capstone final project is surrounding the war on poverty. So just working more on that issue, I think, would be something that I would be interested in.
Well, tell me about the fellowship then. I didn't know you were doing a fellowship.
Sure. So the fellowship is actually, it's an annual program, and it's aimed at, how do I explain this? It's for candidates that are interested in public policy, naturally, but specifically for members of diverse communities, ethnic, I guess, immigrant communities, who are interested in public policy, who are progressive, who are activists, very involved and engaged in their communities. It's a fantastic program that was started actually a couple of years ago. And our program director is someone that's very dedicated in ensuring that members of different communities, ethnic backgrounds, whether it be Asian American, African American, Latino, et cetera, are fully engaged in this process, bringing like-minded young professionals together on a monthly basis. We meet, we discuss different issues at every meeting. We meet with policymakers, scholars in their fields, and at the conclusion of the fellowship, we produce this capstone project.
Individually or as a group?
It's as a group.
Okay. It's similar to the Leadership Arlington program.
Correct.
Meets monthly. The Neighborhood College has a little bit of that similar feel. That's great, though, that you're doing that. So you do a lot. It sounds that way. I think it'd be fair to describe that. What do you think motivates you or inspires you to keep, as I said, we talked about you've aligned your professional life with the volunteer activities pretty well, but that means you almost don't get a break.
That's true.
so I'm curious, what do you think motivates you? What inspires you?
So I mean, when someone asks me who inspires me, I have a number of individuals in mind.
That's
But for example, one of those individuals would be my mother. I mean, we came to the U.S. when I was at a very young age. We immigrated here from Iran, and she has been, you know, the rock in the family. She has held us all together. Raised 4 kids. I mean, she's my inspiration, really. And I think the reason why I do what I do and I try to make the most of my time and try to be active in the community is because I have this opportunity to be here. I live in a country, luckily, that there are so many freedoms given to us that I don't want to take it for granted. Right. So I think especially for individuals that have immigrated to this country, I think that's something that they value very much. In addition to my mom, I would say the other 2 individuals that I respect and I look up to, Tulsi Gabbard, she's one of the youngest members of Congress, female, and then she's a Democrat, co-chair of DNC, and then Justin Amash, on the other hand, a libertarian, Republican, also one of the youngest members. So these are in Congress, yes. Right. Yeah.
I forgot where I was going to go with that. With the so do you feel like? I think you obviously feel part of the community, but you sound like you also have this immigrant. I don't know how do I say memory, or you don't forget the immigrant roots and sort of the context of that. Is that a fair way to describe it?
No, that is a fair way to describe it. And I think that partly shapes my view and issues that I work on. For example, I mean, immigration reform is another issue that I'm passionate about, and that's mainly why, because of the experience. So,
my grandfather came here from Italy, and I think that also shapes you. So I don't have the personal experience. I mean, I was born in Connecticut, grew up in Connecticut. My parents were from Connecticut, but I have that family knowledge or awareness, and so that also shapes my views on immigration and support for immigrant rights and everything. So it's strange how it can last. It's almost like, but that's
No, I agree.
Yeah. So what do you think? We've talked about this. Arlington, there's a lot of people involved. But you know, if you look at some measures, we don't vote, I want to say, at 100%, because we never do. Look at the special election. We had an incredibly low turnout.
Really disappointing. Yeah.
What do you have any ideas about what Arlington can do to get even more engagement?
Sure.
I should say the other phrase we've used on this show is a noisy democracy is a good democracy, and that whatever people's point of view is, there should be a forum and a space and a public space for them to express those ideas, and we're better off if we have that space, because too often now the space is the anonymous comments on a website, you know, to vent and all. So what do you have some ideas?
Some ideas. So my understanding is that, for example, in Democratic primaries, I think the average voter is 62-year-old white female, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I have not looked at the numbers.
So, I mean, the reason why I know this is because obviously I'm trying to get the youth engaged in the process. And I mean, despite the fact that, again, as I mentioned earlier, Arlington, very active community, even the young Democrats. But when it comes to actually voting, so the turnout for the county board was, around 20%, right?
Yeah, something like that, yes.
Right. So, I mean, for me, that was, even though I knew I was going to vote, even though I knew my friends all were going to vote, I was still kind of shocked when I noticed that the turnout was so low.
Yeah.
And I guess I just, sometimes I'm still very surprised. And I think maybe a way to get around that would be to start early in trying to get high school students engaged in the process.
Right.
So, for example, even though any campaign, the county board or congressional campaigns, I think reaching out to high school students, speaking to them, forums, organizing meet and greets with, I think that's very important. Even though they may not be able to vote at that point. They can certainly volunteer for your campaign anyways.
Right. And I think they're ready to vote, because I've done the poll greeting outside of Swanson Middle School, and you know, the kids come in the morning and they're used to us looking at the adults and saying, "Are you here to vote? Are you here to vote?" And a bunch of them, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, they'll come, I'm voting, because they want our attention. So they're ready to vote.
Okay.
I don't think they're able to pull it off, though. Here's the problem, and here's what I think we have to find a way around. High school students are just so busy these days, between all the tests and this is what I think has become in our society, what high school students have become. There's just so much pressure on them that it's hard to sort of add on. I totally agree with you. I think we have to aim lower. In fact, part of my purpose in doing this program is to kind of engage those, have them tune in, have them see people talk about being engaged in the community. But it's tough, because we really have, we've made high school students very busy people. I have a son who's a freshman in high school.
Oh, okay.
And he's very busy. So.
I believe you.
Yeah. But yeah, no, but that's the challenge, is engaging them in that way. But do you think, you have any ideas about coming up with getting people out, more forums, just willing to talk about issues? Do you have any? Because you're working on that. You're working to make that work with your work with the caucus and the Young Dems. So what are your ideas? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure. So, for example, I mean, working on a political campaign, for instance, what I did for OFA and trying to get certain communities that generally weren't as engaged, weren't active, either weren't even voting or volunteering. What I did at that point in Loudoun was very targeted voter contact, either programs or canvas launches, phone banks, forums, anything that was very tailored to that community. So for instance, the turf that I was working, my team, had one of the highest concentrations of AAPI community in Virginia, I think. So knowing that, what we decided to do was we did specific AAPI canvas launches. So we recruited South Asians for Obama volunteers to go knock on the doors of AAPI voters, and that was incredibly helpful, incredibly successful. And we had actually one of the highest turnouts in that district ever. So I think having very targeted voter contact initiatives is very helpful. Some of the other things our team did, for instance, was specific phone banks. Indian Americans calling Indian Americans, telling them to vote for Obama. Iranian Americans, or Latinos or Muslims Americans calling other. So I think having very targeted, untailored programs is very helpful, because that community also feels as though you really care about them, you care about the issues that matter to them. Right. Going to them, going to their community events, to their centers, to their religious centers, talking to them and learning about them. I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So it's probably using technology in smart and good ways.
Definitely.
But it's also, I think, your approach is not just when you're facing a political campaign, think about your base and get your voters to the polls, but it's looking at those people who don't vote, people not engaged. It's reaching outside of the normal political process and the whole debate. Because I think this also is important for not just political candidates, but any issue. And
I absolutely agree.
I really admire Mary Lowe, who's with the Alliance for Housing Solutions here in Arlington, because she's focused on her outreach is engaging that broader community and educating on the issues. It's not, her point is not to work with the developers and the civic associations, not work just with them to sort of come up with a housing solution. She's really trying to engage the broader community. And I think that's important. That leads to the people getting more involved.
Completely agree.
So, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Any of your experiences you wanted to share? I don't want to just sort of jump over things. I've been jumping around. I apologize for that.
No, no. No, I mean, my experience in Arlington has been great thus far. So.
But you have some ideas about making it better.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunity actually to implement some of those ideas. So.
Yeah. Oh, very good. What's like the next year ahead for the Human Rights Commission? Do you have a sense?
I think I speak for the other commissioners on the commission, saying that I feel as though, obviously, like if we see less complaints come in, alleging
Right.
unlawful discrimination,
Right.
then hopefully that means that that issue is diminishing in the
Right.
county. I mean, but then sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes it may just be that
Right.
individuals just are not being proactive and don't want to actually file, even though they have been faced with unlawful discrimination at their workplace. But no, I think the commission is doing fantastic work, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues.
I mean, it's important to have that different voice on the issue, and not just the internal to the departments or the companies. Or it's important to have that separate sort of platform for people to have.
No, definitely.
That is important work. But do you do any? I guess do you do an annual report, or from that commission, does it produce anything annually?
So we review the complaints, and
Okay.
I mean, and we do advise the county board.
It's more ongoing. That's not our second. Okay, fair enough. For some reason, I thought they might do an annual report, and I was going to ask about that. I'm glad we didn't talk about Florida, because let me just tell you, Florida can be a very crazy place. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Florida. All right. Well, thank you very much for
No,
coming to
of
the program.
course. I think. No, I really enjoyed being here, and I'm happy to have come in to talk to you, and I hope that, my my story will hopefully encourage or inspire
I think it will.
young people to get more involved. So.
I think it will. I think it will. All right. Well, I also want to thank our volunteer crew here at Arlington Independent Media. We've had Heff Munson on camera, Steve Cordle and Hilary Freer and Failte in the booth. They've been terrific, as always, great volunteer crew. Most of all, I want to thank Yasmine Taeb for working so hard to make her communities a better place to live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.